So the idea here is that after doing all the hard work that we do, right, take some difficult measurements, solve some difficult theoretical problems, etc. After all that, we need to communicate the results to the rest of the world. If you don't communicate the results to the rest of the world, what would have been the point of having done all that research, right? And therefore, it is very important for all of us, in addition to being good researchers, to also be good communicators. And that is what I will focus on in this seminar. I want all of you, each one of you, to be able to present your research very well in an oral fashion, like stand up in front of an audience and talk about your work, and in a written fashion, meaning write the results of your research in an effective manner that others read and appreciate and benefit from. Okay? So in the next 1.5 hours, I will focus on both oral communication and written communication. I will share with you some tips and tricks that I have learned myself over the years about becoming a confident speaker and becoming an effective technical writer. Okay? I am convinced, absolutely convinced, that this is an extremely important skill to have in addition to doing good research. So if you are in the PhD program, in addition to learning new technical skills, you should also be learning and becoming a better public speaker, a better written communicator, and so on and so forth. Okay, this is before you hit the real world and go out there. This in school is a great opportunity for you to get better at public speaking and at writing. And today, through some slides that I have built over the last several years, I will share some tips and tricks about being a good technical communicator. Okay, so we'll begin with talking about effective presentations. So the idea here is, how do we give effective presentations? And somebody would have to tell me how this goes. Oh, okay. So I'll skip this. So the question is, why do you want to give a presentation? When you are preparing to give a presentation, I want you to think about, why are you there in the situation of giving a presentation? Who is your audience? What is the forum? And what is the intention for the audience to spend time with you? You all are here. There must have been a reason why you are here, right? When I decide how I want to present, I need to think about that. I need to think about what is the motivation of the audience for giving this presentation. And of course, also, what is my own goal in giving the presentation? What am I trying to get out of this interaction between you and me? And I need to try and drive towards getting you that benefit that you're looking for, and getting myself the benefit that I am looking for. My slides, my way of speaking, the technical content of the presentation, etc., should all be geared keeping all of this in mind. Okay? Note that giving presentations is a part and parcel of your professional lives. One day you will graduate, go work for a company, or become a professor yourself. No matter what you do, throughout your lives, you will probably be giving presentations all the time. This is something that you will never be able to leave behind. In 5 years, you may be working on an entirely different research area, but you will still be presenting it. You'll present it to your colleagues, to your boss, to the CEO of the company, to your customers, to your vendors. No matter who the audience is, you will never get away from presenting, right? And if it is something that important, and if it is going to determine your professional growth, then you better get good at it. There is no doubt that your professional growth will be determined by the quality of your presentations. You will be judged very soon as you give your defense. You will be judged by the quality of your presentations. No one in the committee is going to go to the lab and take a look at your experimental setup, right? They will look at the picture that you showed there. And therefore, the quality of that picture should be representative of the actual quality of the work that you've done in the lab. You've worked many months to set up a very beautiful experimental setup. If you don't take a nice picture of it, and if it is that poor, shabby picture that shows up in your presentation, then that becomes representative of your work, not the actual work that you've done. You know what I'm saying? So you have to put almost as much effort in designing your presentation as the effort that you have put in doing the work.
Okay, it deserves that. And if there is one thing that I want you to take away from our interactions here, it is that practice is the most important ingredient of becoming a good presenter. If you practice enough number of times, you can present to any audience. Even the most experienced people often feel nervous before giving an important presentation. It is natural to feel nervous, especially the if it is an important presentation, right? If I am giving a presentation for my PhD defense, then it is natural to feel a little fluttery, some butterflies in your stomach. It's okay. Take a deep breath. If you have practiced your defense talk 5 times in front of a appreciative audience, then you will certainly do well. Okay? So the number one thing to remember from everything you're listening to here is the importance of practice. When I was a student many years ago, I used to feel very, very shivery and uneasy, and I just wanted to run away from any opportunity to present and so on. It comes with practice. I have now given this talk and my other talks enough number of times that I feel confident about it. But I was not like that when I started. All right? I don't think there is anybody who's born with the innate skill of presenting. And even if you're not born with it, it's okay. You can get it. You can learn, right? It's like walking. Nobody knew how to walk when they were born. We all learn it, and then we start running, and then somebody runs a marathon and becomes an extremely good runner. That person didn't run a marathon as soon as he came into this world, right? Similarly, all these good presenters you see all around on the internet, whatever, they got there by practicing, and so can you, is all I'm saying. Okay. One more thing that I want to share with you all is that as a student, as a technical scientist, engineer, etc., you've got to be able to give a 60-minute talk, a 20-minute talk, and a 2-minute talk as well, right? So say one of you is walking with me back to lunch, and I ask you, what research do you do? You have only about 2 minutes to spend on somebody, and in those 2 minutes you have to be able to summarize what work you're doing. Oftentimes giving a 2-minute talk is much more difficult than giving a 60-minute talk, because you've got to really summarize a lot of things in a very short amount of time. You will, I'm quite confident, see those occasions when you've got to really just put it out, sort of like TikTok, right? You've got, what, 15 seconds or whatever it is, in which you have to summarize a lot of things. Okay? So be ready to do that as you progress in your careers. I want to say a few things about virtual presentations, because that has become a part and parcel of our professional lives. Before COVID, I didn't have this slide, but it turns out that virtual presentations are now a way of life. Even very important things like job interviews, a dissertation defense, etc., now happen on virtual tools. So it's important for yourself to familiarize with the virtual tool. How many of you have used Zoom? Most. Teams, it's also very common, but those are not the only two ones. There is this thing called GoToWebinar, and there are at least a few others. And when somebody sends me an invite with this weird tool that I have never used, I have to be ready to expect any surprises, right? My computer can restart at any time to install some random update, right? All kinds of things can go wrong when doing a virtual presentation. If the occasion is important enough, you've got to be prepared, right? Make sure you switch on and switch off your computer once so that it installs whatever stupid updates it needs to install. Install the software tool directly. Have a backup device. Make sure your equipment works. Make sure you're well dressed, right? From the top to the bottom, by the way, not just the top, right? And give a virtual practice talk in advance. Using the same tool, using the same setup, have a couple of your friends join virtually and listen to you and give you feedback about whether they were able to hear you, they were able to see you, whether everything worked well or not, right? Prepare in advance. And when you are giving your presentation, make sure that you keep gauging audience engagement by asking questions. Am I clear? Can you still hear me? Do I need to say something else, etc., etc.? That keeps the audience engaged in your presentation. And keep in mind, that just because it is virtual does not mean that it is not important. As I said, these days, even very important things, meetings, presentations, etc., happen online. Okay? So, what I will do in the rest of this part of my talk is to talk a few things about how to present, right? How to approach the thought of giving a presentation, and I will also give a few practical talks, practical suggestions about the PowerPoint presentation that you will probably make in order to present. Okay, and by the way, I'm happy to share these slides with anyone. So if you would like, this is Pesky. If you would like, I'll be happy to share these slides with you. Okay. First of all, the first question in organizing your talk is how many slides should I have? And the approximate answer to that is about 2 minutes per slide should be your budget. If you have a 60-minute presentation, don't have 100 slides. That's unfair. Your audience will simply not be able to understand 100 slides in 60 minutes, especially if you're presenting some dense work, right? You've got to give yourself enough time to be able to teach the audience what you're trying to teach them. It's better to teach them less but effectively rather than throw a bunch of material at them and not explain what in the world is going on. So what I try to do is about 2 minutes per slide, and I feel that having too many slides is worse than having few. If I have fewer slides, I have more time to spend on it. But if I throw 200 slides into my deck, I will never be able to tell everything. Okay? The title slide is very important because people look at it for a long time. So make sure you have a nice clear title on the title slide. Make sure you have a nice picture of your research on the title slide, your affiliation, etc., etc. The title slide should look professional. I say this to my students, of course this changes. Use your institutional logo. Why not throw the logo of your institution on the bottom and make it look nice, professional, right? Heavy. You want to create a good solid impression. In other words, your for the men here, it should look like you're wearing a tie and not coming in kurta pajama if it is an important presentation. You've got to spend sufficient time in the introductory slides. I like to say, and somebody said this to me, that your grandmother should be able to understand the first 2 slides of your presentation. After that, if you lose her attention, it's okay. But the first 2 slides, she should be able to understand what in the world is going on, right? So the first 2 slides should be a big picture overview of the entire field in which your work is there. Answer a few questions. Why is this work important? What is the big picture of the importance of this work? How will this work save the world, right? And the second question you should answer is, why should the audience be interested? Try to somehow connect your work with the audience. Make them part of this discussion, right? Think of an example which people will be able to relate to, right? So for example, when I give talks about battery heat transfer, I often talk about cell phones and how cell phones get hot, because that is something most people have experienced, right? And that way I try to make a connection with the rest of the audience. Keep also in mind that first impression is the last impression. Most people will have judged your talk within the first 5 minutes of the presentation. Beyond that, they are just listening and, there's minor adjustment in their assessment of your work. It's the first 5 minutes that are extremely important for you to win or lose your audience. And of course, I'm not saying spoon feed everything to the audience. After the first few slides, if your content becomes more and more complicated, that's okay. In fact, the last 2 slides should be pretty difficult to understand, because you also want to give an impression about the difficulty of your work, right? You're not teaching ABCD here. It's okay to teach ABCD for the first couple of slides, but towards the last slide, you've got to get up to Shakespeare or something like that. Yeah? On the other end of the talk, concluding your talk appropriately is also important. So at the end, you must re-emphasize the important things that came out of your talk. think in advance about 2 or 3 most important things that you want the audience to remember, to take away with them. And those 2 and 3 things you should restate towards the end of your talk, right? And then in the end, thank the audience and ask for questions. Perhaps the last slide should just have 2 sentences that conclude everything that you want the audience to remember even 2 days, 3 days after your talk. Okay? Keep in mind that you are very familiar with the material, but the audience is not. The audience needs a little extra time to understand what you're talking about. And that is why putting those things explicitly in your last slide helps the audience understand it better. Okay? Any questions or comments so far? Yes. Sure, the logo can be wherever you would like it to be. Just keep it consistent. Okay? All right. In general, confidence is the most important thing. Okay? You've got to stand up confidently. Everything about the presentation needs to show confidence. The quality of your slides, your body language, the way you're dressed up, and everything else. You got to show your enthusiasm should be flowing out of you through your body language, right? So one thing that people say is that you should smile, right? If you don't smile, people think that you're not interested, right? Whereas if you're enthusiastic, you're smiling, it shows that you are invested in the work, that you're enthusiastic about it, you're passionate about it. Okay, the way you look at everyone in the audience makes a very big difference. So for an audience of about 20 people like this, I try to look at each one of you eye to eye within this 30-40 minutes of my presentation. Okay, that eye contact is very important, I feel. All right, certainly do not speak like this. Certainly don't look at the floor or the ceiling or at your slides all the time. This happens all the time. I see people who give a presentation like this, right? The audience is not there to see your back. The audience is there to see your face and to talk with you, right? The slides are just a facilitator to have a conversation with the audience. And if all that you are going to do is to read the slides, then what is the point of having a meeting? Then I could just email the slides to everyone and everyone could just read the slides wherever they are. The audience didn't come here to read your slides. The audience came here to hear you. And the audience should not be forced to listen to you reading material that is already there. Right? The audience knows how to read. You don't have to read it to them, is what I'm saying. Okay? Face the audience and address them. Don't just keep looking at the slides. Someone told me that it shows a lot of confidence to move your hands quite a lot when you talk. So instead of this is very confrontational, right? I'm almost saying, do you have any problem with me, right? When I do that. Instead, when I do this, I feel like I'm opening myself to you and your ideas. So use these skills, these technical ideas about effective technical presentations. By the way, there's a whole organization called Toastmasters. Is there a Toastmasters chapter here on campus? So Toastmasters is an organization which is focused on public speaking, and they have chapters at different campuses, run essentially by students, and everybody in the Toastmasters organization is essentially interested in becoming a better public speaker. They meet once a week or whatever and have seminars and this that about public speaking. If there isn't one, take a look and see if anyone of you is interested in starting one here at Roped. Also keep in mind that most of the times you know about that topic more than anybody else in the audience. You are the expert, right? When you go on and do your PhD dissertation defense, nobody in that room, including your advisor, knows more about that topic than you do. You are the one who was there in the lab at 12 o'clock in the night, and took those measurements or ran those simulations, right? That should give you confidence that you can give a good presentation. Another thing that should give you confidence is that most of the times the audience is not out there to make you feel bad or embarrassed, right? Most of the times nobody there genuinely wants to trip you or make you fail or to not see you succeed, right? We all are here because we are a community, right? A community of scholars and academicians, and we want everyone to succeed. And so feel, don't feel that people will throw eggs at me. They will not. They really want to listen to something from you. That's why they're here, and they really want me to succeed. Okay? And again, practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the better you will get at it. Whenever I make new slides and I present it for the first time, I stumble. It doesn't come out well because I'm not very familiar with the slides. I don't know which is the next slide that will come after this. It's not in tune with me. But the second time I give that same presentation, I remember the places where I stumbled and I get a little better at it. The third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, I progressively get better. By about the fifth time I have given a presentation, I am much, much better than that first time. So the message is that if it is an important enough presentation, you should have given that presentation already several number of times. Don't finish making your slides for your dissertation one day before. Finish it 2 weeks before so that you can gather up your lab mates and ask them to listen to your presentation and give feedback, give good honest feedback. Okay, feed them pizza if that is what it takes. Get good critical feedback from them. Okay, it's a good idea to memorize the first and last few lines of your talk, and it's a good idea to time your slides. You should have some vague idea of which of these slides you will be able to go through very quickly and which of these slides you will be able to, which will take time for you to do. For example, I know that I have about 18 slides in this presentation, and if I am at slide number 9, I am at the midway point, and I can calibrate looking at the clock. I can either speed up or slow down in order to finish the last half of the talk. This happens very commonly that you have only 2 minutes left in your talk, in your allocated time, but there are 20 slides remaining. Don't get into that situation because that situation becomes very embarrassing. So know your halfway point and make an adjustment much in advance. Don't wait for the last 2 minutes. Make this adjustment much in advance. You'll be able to adjust much more smoothly and comfortably. You shouldn't become an express train only in the last 2 minutes in order to finish. Okay? Speak loudly, clearly, and slowly. So speaking loudly and slowly is often problematic because when we speak loudly, we tend to speak fast as well. But what I am asking you to do is to speak slower but louder, and that takes a little bit of practice. Why do you want to do that? Because you want to give the audience a little extra time to understand the material that you are teaching or communicating, right? The audience needs a little extra time to be able to understand what you are saying. So if you speak at the same speed as if you're having a regular hallway conversation, that's too fast for people to understand what you're saying. So go a little slower than that and go a little louder than usual so that people can easily hear you and understand what in the world is going on. Okay, so slower than a regular conversation. And it's important to communicate the message rather than speak good English. Even if you are not a good English speaker, that's okay. That's not what the audience will evaluate you on the basis of. You can always use very plain English, very simple sentence structures, and still be able to communicate the technical points that are important, right? It's the engineering or the science you're doing which is important and not the language. In our community, science and engineering, it's important to be precise. Those who give a dissertation defense in English probably keep speaking forever and go here and go there and meander around. We don't do that. We have a technical, a scientific message to convey, and for that our language needs to be precise and to the point. It's helpful to move around the room a little bit, but not too much. And please plan your timing very well. As I said, panicking in the last 1 or 2 minutes looks very unprofessional. Okay? Any questions or comments so far? How do I go back? Okay, now I think you can. Okay. So now what I will do is that I will talk about some practical suggestions related to PowerPoint. Almost all of us use PowerPoint. Is there anybody here who does not use PowerPoint for their slides? I know some weird people who use LaTeX to make PowerPoint presentations. Good luck to them. But I stick to PowerPoint. 99.9% of the world sticks to PowerPoint. And so here are a few suggestions about PowerPoint, right? And I want to communicate these suggestions by showing an example, a good example of a bad slide. This is a poor slide. Why is it a poor slide? Too much information. Exactly. This slide has too much information. Perhaps if I had done all this work, I would be very familiar with all of this. I will know what is going on. But the audience does not know this. Even your advisor, even your committee members probably do not understand all of this as much as you do. Right? I hope you worked hard enough to get to that stage. At that point, if you show them all of this, if you throw all of this at them, not much will stick. It is your job to break it down into easily digestible nuggets and present one nugget at a time. Okay? So your slides need to be very well designed. They need to be a pleasure to look at. Somebody looks at it and says, yeah, that looks beautiful, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And not, oh God, I don't know what this is, I can't even read all this. Right? In 2 minutes time, it is impossible for someone sitting in the back to read all of that and then to also understand everything that is being said. That is beyond most human beings. How do I make good plots? This is very important. Plots are the heart of our presentations. No matter what we do, we all will make some kind of a plot, right? The quality of that plot determines the quality of the presentation. Alright, so you must have spent a lot of time in making good quality plots. I tell my students, the quality of the plots is non-negotiable. I am not going to negotiate on it. If the plots do not have good quality, we are not moving forward no matter what happens. Go back please and make sure that the plots are the best possible quality. So here is a good example of a good plot and a bad plot. Can somebody tell me a couple of good things about the one on the left? It's very clear, right? That one is grainy, a little hazy, the line is kind of jagged. This one, everything is nice and smooth. What else do you like about the left plot? Sorry? Readability, exactly. See, the font sizes are large enough for me to be able to read. Oftentimes what happens is that when you make a plot in MATLAB or something like that, the legend font is smaller, and when it is in front of you on the screen it looks okay. But then you put the same plot on PowerPoint and project it to an audience in a large room, then from the back this font becomes very difficult to read. That is why you have to go to the PowerPoint, you have to go to the MATLAB fig file, and you have to increase the font size of the inset so that this font size is almost the same as the rest of the fonts. Okay, I have used 5 different colors and 4 different line styles, right? I've tried to break the monotony. If this was a black and white plot, it would have been difficult to read and understand, right? but I have tried to use multiple different colors and colors and line styles in order to be able to make the point I'm trying to make. Okay. Finally, this is accompanied by a very detailed title or caption for the plot. Right? This caption tells me almost everything that I need to know about this plot. Whereas this says temperature versus time plot. Oh, what in the world does that mean? Temperature of what or temperature of who? Right? This is the time not to be short. This is the time to define your figure as well as you possibly can. Okay? Never make your plots in Excel. Okay? If you're still using Excel to make your plots, please grow up and start using a more professional tool such as MATLAB. Okay? These are examples of plots made in Excel. I can almost see a plot and say that look, this was made in Excel. It's poor, very, very poor. Minimize the amount of data in plots. Your plots should not be a jumbo mumbo of data like it is shown here. Right? It's very difficult for people to untangle this and understand what in the world is going on. Simplify things, have multiple plots if needed. Increase the font size of the plots yourself. Don't depend on the default that MATLAB gives you. Right? Nobody knows why MATLAB gives you the default font size. I always increase that font size a little bit just for things to look nice and happy. Okay? Keep in mind that maybe you can understand all this because you were the one that took the measurements, but not the audience. So give them the ability to understand things by simplifying it for them a little bit. Never show raw data. There is no point of presenting raw data. Nobody can understand this data the way it is written. You can always plot it. Okay? At the minimum, use 16-point font size. More commonly, my recommendation is to use at least 18. Okay? And when it comes to font type, it is very well known that the correct font to use in presentations is Arial and not Times New Roman. Times New Roman is known to be a good font for written reports, but for presentations, Arial is the right one. Apart from these, don't use any other fancy fonts, never use yellow, avoid orange, and never use all caps. And finally, your slides should have 0 spelling mistakes or grammatical errors. Maybe one is allowed. When I am the audience and I look at a presentation and I see one spelling mistake, I take a deep breath, control myself, and give the benefit of the doubt to the speaker. I say, okay, it's okay. But if I see a second spelling mistake, I completely switch myself off and start doing anything else that I need to do. Okay? Do what it takes to find and eliminate all spelling mistakes and grammatical errors in your slides. Give it to somebody else and say, you know, I'll cook dinner for you, or I'll take you out, or whatever it takes. Please, can you look at my slides and help me fix all mistakes that there may be in the slides. Okay? Don't use animations. This little animation that happened, it came down from the bottom and settled down there. Actually, PowerPoint can do even more funny things. Something can come here and fly around and then come here. We're not trying to make it dramatic. And the audience is not 5-year-old kids who want that kind of thrill, right? Our job is very simple. Our job is to come here, communicate a few ideas, and let the audience go away with some points, right? Anything else that you do distracts the audience from that transfer of information, right? So keep things simple. I am a big fan of minimalism. See, I didn't have a lot of people, you know, use these PowerPoint templates in which half the slide is covered by some sort of background and all that stuff, which doesn't even make sense. Don't use that. A plain white slide, maybe with a red or blue or some such boundary is just enough for your needs. Okay? People in sales and marketing may be okay, but engineering, technical work, science, we need to be minimalistic. I do not like to have an outline slide in my work, in my presentations, but if you think it is helpful for yours, that's okay. Certainly keep it. Okay? Keep in mind that a lot of the things I am saying is not universal truth. I am saying do not have an outline slide. You could very well say, no, I think it is helpful based on my style to have an outline slide. And if that is the case, then yeah, have an outline slide. Right? This is not God's word. This is not Newton's law of presentations, which has to be correct and true and to be followed all the time. All I want you to do is to think carefully about your presentations and design your presentations. Your presentations should not just randomly come together on the last minute. You should have thought about it enough, you should have designed it, you should have iterated upon it, and that is when it should have come together as a beautiful final product, is what I'm trying to say here. Okay? Having figures is a good idea. So unless you're doing extreme mathematical work, it's a good idea to have at least one picture, figure, plot, something like that per slide, just to break the monotony. Okay? And when you do that, it is important for you to acknowledge all figures, especially those that are not from your work. So if you borrowed this figure from somebody else, you just write their name and the year or something like that in order to convey clearly that, look, I'm not trying to pass that off as my own work. Box your figures. I feel like putting a box around the figure makes it look better, and of course box the entire slide. That also I find is helpful. Minimize text. As you can see, minimize text. If you can say something in 5 words instead of 10 words, do that. Okay? You don't have to write full sentences in your slides, and you don't have to write everything that the audience needs to know. The slides are just a means to an end. They are just a facilitator. It's not a report, right? A report and a presentation are different. A report is supposed to be comprehensive. It's supposed to have everything, right? But a presentation, just bullet points is sufficient. Okay? Give generous space between lines and don't just stand there and read your slides. That comes out very poorly. It shows extreme lack of confidence. And if you have to take a gulp of water once in a while, do that. It gives a very good break to yourself and to the audience as well, right? Nobody wants you to keep speaking for an hour without getting water if you need to. Handling questions and answers is also a very important part of giving presentations, because oftentimes people use that to gauge whether you know the material, whether you understand the material or not, etc., etc. So I will share some tips about running a good question and answer session at the end of your talk. Here's a few options. Firstly, you could specify Q&A policy in advance. A lot of the times, as a speaker, I could get rattled if people start asking me questions from the very start, right? And I have seen that happen, where there's a couple of people in the audience who are ready to jump and pounce on you almost as soon as you start, right? If you have such a person and if you want to avoid that, you can politely specify the Q&A policy in advance. You can say at the very start that I will be very happy, I'm planning to speak only for 40 minutes, there'll be a lot of time towards the end, and I'll be happy to take questions at the end. All right? When you say that, that person might still anyway ask questions, but you've done your best and that's okay. All right? You will find that there are all kinds of questions you will face. One category of questions is offensive questions, right? A 60-year-old professor gets up and says, that work was done by so and so in 1979. Why are you repeating this work? Right? It almost sounds like a personal insult, right? You have to take a deep breath, get some water if needed, and be polite in the response to that question, right? You cannot answer an offensive question with an offensive answer. You can't say you are too old, sit down, right? Or something like that. That's not. You have to somehow manage the situation. You have to say, I understand, Professor so and so, your concerns. I have also read that paper, and here are the reasons why my work is different from that paper's work, or something along those lines, right? On the other hand, there are also some questions which will sound, rather easy, or you feel like, what, you didn't understand even that much, right? Don't say that. Don't put it in such words. Do not ever consider a question to be stupid or foolish. If somebody has taken the courage to ask a question, he or she is really interested in understanding it. Why not help him or her by addressing that question very well, right? It's a sign that that person is actually interested in your work. In fact, if my 60-minute talk does not generate even a single question, it means I have completely failed at the task of communicating those ideas to the audience. I was not able to generate interest or enthusiasm in anybody enough to be able to ask a question, right? So getting good questions and getting a large number of questions is actually a good encouraging sign that your presentation went very well. Okay, so never be condescending. Never say, oh, I'm not even going to answer that question or something like that. Be polite and explain whatever needs to be explained to answer a simple question. Okay, and then another category of question that you will get is, somebody will get up and say, I have two questions for you. Question number one is blah 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 blah, and question number two is blah 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 blah. By the time they finish asking the two questions, you have forgotten the first question. Even they have forgotten the first question, right? People oftentimes are competing for time, right? And they want to throw out both questions at the same time so that they get answered, right? There are a few ways of addressing that. After that person has finished asking the two questions, you can take a deep breath and say, okay, those are two very good questions. Let us start by answering the second question, because you probably remember the second question, right? So answer the second question first and then say, oh, can you remind me what your first question was, right? And that way you've given yourself a little more time to remember, understand and calibrate and then answer your first question. Okay, oftentimes it is helpful to repeat the question. Somebody asks you a question from the back, it's a long question, you need a little bit of time to think about it. In fact, the audience also needs time to understand that question. So if you say, oh, I think the question that you asked me was blah 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 blah, it gives you and it gives the audience some extra time to think about it and to frame your question properly. Okay, oftentimes people will ask questions that are genuinely difficult to answer in the limited time that you have. And so you always have the nuclear option of saying, this is a complicated question because of the following reasons. Why don't we talk about it in the hallway after we are done with this seminar? You can use that maybe once in your Q&A. You can't say that for every question that comes your way. That will not look very good either. Okay? If you like a question, please acknowledge it. If somebody asks you a really insightful question, something that really goes to the heart of the problem that you are solving, that really helps you, that illuminates something in you, then hand on your heart, say it. Say, what a nice question, I really appreciate it, that brings us exactly to the point that I'm trying to make, and then answer the question. Okay? Again, remember, having lots of Q&A is actually a sign of a great presentation. So I think I'm coming to the end of this part of my talk. Miscellaneous things, make sure the technology works. The projector, the laptop, the laser pointer, the everything else. Videos in particular, if you have videos in PowerPoint, oftentimes videos will work very well on your computer, and you connect it to the other computer and suddenly you click, nothing happens, the video doesn't work, right? Figure out a foolproof way of handling your videos. I don't know the right answer to it. It's up to you. You have to figure out a way in which your videos will work for sure when you go to that room and give that presentation. Go to that room a day before and do a dress rehearsal exactly in that room to make sure everything is working. Okay? Shut down your cell phone, pop-up apps on your device, carry plenty of backup. I like to carry, if for important occasions, I like to carry my slides in my laptop, slides in my USB drive, slides on the cloud in PPT and PDF formats, so that if this doesn't work, that will work. If that doesn't even work, then there is like a double backup situation. I don't want to fail. I don't want to spend 5 minutes panicking trying to download something from somewhere. Internet nahi chal raha, ye ho raha hai, wo ho raha hai. That doesn't convey the right impression to people, right? You've got to look and sound professional. And carry a laser pointer and a spare battery for your work. Okay? So with that, I am finishing the first part of my talk, which was on oral communication. How do you stand up and give good presentations, which you all will do without any doubt throughout your professional careers. Okay? So I'll stop here, get some water, and happy to take any questions that there may be before we switch to the other thing. Yes?
Some of the time it happens that we are having lots of data and
Lots of data.
lots of figures also.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to conclude it into 14 minutes.
Yeah.
Then that in that process, most of the time slide becomes bulky. A lot of the things.
Yeah, that's the challenge, especially in doing a PhD, right? You will have a lot of data. You just have to figure out what is more important, what is less important, what can be combined together, and what you can express, in a short but effective fashion. You have limited time. You don't want to stand there and tell stories upon stories of how that measurement was done. Instead, you can say that measurement was done in this manner, and let me jump to the results, because I think the results are a lot more interesting than the technique itself was. Right? This is entirely up to each one of you. You have to figure out how you will address your unique situation. This problem that Kulbhushan ji has said, almost every one of you doing a PhD and all that will face, that you'll have too much data to present in too little time. And you just have to compress things, prioritize things, eliminate some, put them in the backup slide so that you are able to talk about it if somebody asks. But just say, look, about this experiment, I have data in the backup slides, but in the interest of time, I will not talk about that. But instead, I will go to these more interesting simulations that I have done. That may be a good strategy to use. Okay? Yes?
When we are starting, we are having some outlines.
Hmm.
As you talk, sometimes it's better to not show.
Yes.
It is not required, that's fine. But sometimes it's actually compulsory by template.
Okay.
So at that time, because already we are going in that same flow,
Yes.
and what things we should talk in the outline slide, and what things should not actually, and how much we should focus.
See, if having an outline slide is compulsory because your advisor asked you to do, or if it's there in the template, then certainly have an outline slide. What you should put in the outline slide depends on you, right? My personal feeling is that an outline slide should give the audience a roadmap of what you are going to present. And a good way to do that perhaps is through pictures. Why not have like research achievements and then have 4 different bubbles in which you have 4 different accomplishments from your PhD, each with a picture, and then say A, B, C, D. Let's start with A, then we'll come to B, then we'll come to C, and then we'll finish with D. Something like that. Okay? Keep in mind, what I am saying are merely suggestions. Each one of you has to sit down and think about your unique situation and what you think works best for yourself. What works best for you may not work well for you, and so on. Right? But you've got to design your slides, think about it, and come to what you think works best for you. Okay? Cool. How to cite? Well, if your specific community or the lab has a specific format, then you should follow that. No, you have to refer it right there, I think. There is no point of referring to it in the very back. Right? If somebody is really interested, oh, where did that data come from? If that reference is on slide number 45, they will never be able to make that connection, right? So you might as well, if this is a plot that you borrowed from somebody else's paper, just write here, you know, Smith 2022 or something like that. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
Sir, actually, when we are putting some references, is hyperlinking is necessary or not?
In giving a presentation, hyperlinking is uh, not a bad idea, because if you have to somehow discuss it in more detail, then it is readily available for you at a click. So why not put a hyperlink? Sure. Yes. Question in the back?
Can we use one slide like 2 times to show if we are using like my schematic is for numerical work?
Yes. No problem. No harm done. If you think it helps in communicating that to the audience, absolutely, by all means use it again. Okay? Yes.
One problem we have whenever we use any graph into the slides and we paste it in a picture format, the quality of that graph always reduces.
Yes. So to do that, the practical tip is that in MATLAB, any fig file, most of you use MATLAB, I assume? Yeah. In MATLAB, how do you export it to PowerPoint? Copy paste?
Just copying and
No. Copy paste is not a good idea. You can take a MATLAB file, a fig file, and you can export it to a TIFF file. And when doing that export, MATLAB allows you to specify the resolution of that TIFF file. If you export it with a 600 by 600 resolution, then pasting it into PowerPoint works very well, and it preserves the original resolution of the image. That plot I showed you, remember, one with 5 different colors, that was a TIFF file. So your standard technique of using MATLAB in PowerPoint should be to export every fig file as a TIFF file. It creates a new file, and TIFFs can be easily pasted into PowerPoint. Yes.
like you said, introduction keeps the audience engaging with you.
Yes.
In the very first segment. So when we are delivering the presentation for our defense,
Yes.
and we need to show more and more work
Yes.
within a confined time.
Yes.
So how much introduction should we add? Like how much literature we should
Sure.
learn? So,
My feeling is that the literature survey should be very comprehensive. Especially I'm talking about this now in the context of a PhD dissertation defense. What is the point of a PhD dissertation defense? You are defending your ideas. You are saying that, look, I have added to the knowledge base. In order to be able to make that claim, you have to first summarize what the knowledge base was before you started, right? The audience, especially your committee, is interested in understanding the context of your work. Why did you even do that work? I did that work because somebody else has done this work, and I feel that he or she did not do this work, and I feel that that work is important for these reasons, which is why I will now present my work. You need to give enough justice to that first part to be able to then say that, look, my work is important, right? In my opinion, even if it takes 10-15 minutes for you to set the stage in a PhD dissertation defense, you've got to do that. But keep in mind, given the nature of the presentation, you should not be talking too much about the big picture. If I am giving a presentation on molecular dynamics simulations in lithium-ion batteries to an audience that knows about that field, I don't want to spend 3 slides saying that there is an energy crisis in the world and lithium-ion batteries may perhaps save the world, etc., etc. Right? That kind of introduction is helpful if you're giving this presentation to undergraduate students. Right? But for people who already work in that field, who are very familiar with it, you've got to talk about it very briefly and then get down to the importance of molecular dynamic simulations in lithium-ion batteries. and spend most of your introduction talking about that rather than the big picture. Okay? Every occasion is different, so you've got to think carefully about your specific occasion and design it accordingly. Okay? Yes. I don't see a problem with that. I don't see a problem with that. Yes. Same title is just okay. Alright? Any other questions or comments? You know, we just ate and so I'm going through water. Okay, so what I will now do is that I will switch to the other thing that I want to talk about, and that is writing. So in addition to oral communication, the other way with which we communicate our ideas to the world is written communication. And that again, as a PhD student, as a faculty, it is something that we do all the time. You all in your scientific and engineering careers will always be writing something or the other. You may be writing reports, you may be writing manuscripts, books, what have you, you will still be writing. Okay, this is a tile from some market in Italy. I was there once, and this nice person was selling these ceramic tiles for different professions. So there was a firefighter, and there was a policeman, and there was a farmer, and they were doing their typical things, right? She had a slide, a tile for the professor, il professore. What was the professor doing? The professor was not running experiments. The professor was not doing simulations. The professor wasn't even teaching. The professor was writing. The point I'm trying to make is that writing is an integral part of my profession as a professor, and by extension of you all as somebody who's trying to learn and grow. Right? Writing is extremely important. It is an integral part of doing research. I would make an argument that if I go to the jungle and do some fantastic research, solve all the energy problems of the world, but I never tell that to anyone, then would I have even done that research? Would you consider that research to have even been done? I would argue no. I feel that in order for some research to have been considered as being done, others need to know about it. Others need to be told about it. And one common way in which we do that is by writing. We communicate to the intended audience through a variety of writing mechanisms: reports, papers, books, chapters, etc. And I would argue that your research is not done just when your measurements or your simulations are done. You're only, starting with a new chapter of your research, which is to write your research and communicate it to the audience. And towards that, I would say that the act of writing research, writing up your research, is almost as important as the research itself. And the two must go together with each other. These are not sequential things. These are things that must happen in parallel. While you are doing your research is when you should already be starting to write and generate new ideas for research, right? So it goes both ways. The research provides the fuel for the writing, but as you write, you realize that new ideas will come. You'll say, okay, I've written this. It would have been very nice if I can also explain this, and to do that I have to go back and run a new simulation, right? So you go back and run that simulation, and research and writing therefore contribute and learn from each other. Okay, I tell my students, do not stop until you're done with everything to start writing. You should start writing when you're about 1/3 into your project, and that will help you greatly in the quality of your work itself. It provides a great motivation for doing the work, because when you start writing is actually when you realize what you're doing and what is missing, right? When you write, you're trying to convince the reader of a certain points. And when you write, you see that, look, there is a big hole here that I need to fill. I'm not able to convince them because I don't have this data. So let me go back and generate that data through measurements or simulations or whatever, and then come back and complete the story. You know what I'm saying? So today I will talk about some practical tips about becoming good writers. You will see that some of the tips I will share are similar to the tips I shared about presentations. Most importantly, the importance of practice. You can with practice become a good speaker, excuse me, and you can with practice also become a good writer. Okay, I want you to think about what do we write. So just like I wanted you to think about who your audience is, similarly here I want you to think about who is going to read your report or whatever it is that you're writing. Are you writing for your advisor? Are you writing for your peer group? Are you writing for some anonymous reviewer? Are you writing for the boss of your company? Are you writing for your customer? Or who the audience is? Because the style of your writing needs to recognize that and needs to be designed accordingly. Right? If you're writing a book for undergraduate students to do something versus if you're writing a highly dense JFM paper that will go to the top person in the world for review, your style has to be different, right? So you've got to acknowledge that and you've got to recognize the objectives of writing it. Why are you writing this? Who are you trying to convince? How will you go about convincing them about your ideas? And as I said, writing is very important as the research itself. You will be judged by the quality of your writing. We all read some very old papers, right? Have you ever read a paper from the 1960s? You may have. You read that paper, that person is long gone, but his or her work stays, right? You look at that paper and say, wow, what a nice paper this guy has written. His soul, wherever it may be, will probably feel happy about it. In that sense, writing is our legacy, right? After we are all done and gone from this world, what we write, what our name appears on it, will still stay here. And people will judge us on the basis of the quality of our work. That is the imprint that we will leave after we are all gone, right? Let that motivate you to write well. I don't want somebody 50 years later to read my paper and say, oh, what shabby work, right? I want them to say kind things about me through the work that they read from me, okay? And of course, you know, this is philosophical, this was all philosophical, but of course there are also some very practical benefits of writing well. If you write well, you will have papers published in top journals, you will get good jobs, you will graduate, you will get promoted, etc., etc. Right? It's a very important skill that will help you grow professionally, just like presentations. And as I said, your writing is your legacy. And now the question is, how do I write? Unfortunately, I do find that this is a common problem among students in general. Students don't write well. And I think that learning to write well is a part of the PhD process. During your PhD, not only are you trying to learn new experimental measurement techniques or new simulations or new math, at the same time you should also be learning how to present well and how to write well. Unfortunately, there is no magic wand for learning to write well. I can't just say, jump, now you're a good writer, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. I wish there was a USB cable that I can connect to your brain and transfer whatever little I know, but that doesn't work that way. Each one of you has to sort of learn it on your own, and the best way to learn it is with practice. The more you write, the better you will get at it. If you're a new PhD student, the first paper you write, the draft, will probably come out pretty poor, right? And I'm sure all of you have had this experience that you sent something to your advisor and it came back more red than black, right? It has happened with me as well. I see some people smiling away. It can look very discouraging, okay? But I want you to try to see what your advisor did with all that red ink. What are the things that he was trying to tune? How was he or she trying to adjust the writing? Right? Try to look at some few salient points of what is different about this writing than what I gave to him or her. Right? Mimic the style of good writers. As you read papers in your field, identify 2 or 3 good papers that really impressed you, that you learned a lot from, as opposed to some really bad papers that were just blabbering around. Take those 3 good papers and try to follow the style of those writers. It could be your advisor, or it could be somebody else in an entirely different part of the world. That's okay, right? They say, yeah, mimicry is the best way of flattery, or something, some such English phrase, right? The best way to teach yourself something is to just follow something that somebody else is already doing very well. You're not copying them, you're just copying their style. And develop a good writing process. How do you write? Where do you write? Perhaps even that is important. Do you write in your hostel room? Do you write in the library? Do you write in your lab? Perhaps you will realize that one of these places just somehow brings out the writer in you much better. Maybe the lab is too noisy and the hostel is too many people coming in and out, but the library has a little nook where everybody will leave you alone and you can keep writing forever. Or maybe you will find that you write much better in the cacophony of the hostel room. Right? Try it out and see what works for you. There isn't one right answer for any of this. But go figure it out for yourself. And as I said, your advisor can be a very good person to learn from. So take a look at the corrections, the edits that your advisor is making on your drafts, and see if you can find a good big picture of what is going on. Why is he cutting out this line and replacing it with this? If you can follow the pattern, you will see what he or she is trying to do to your draft. Okay? I'll talk about the writing process. This is what I do for my writing and I find it to be very effective. So I want to share it with you. Whether it works for you or not, I do not know, but I want you to create a process for yourself. When I have to write a large manuscript about a paper that I'm writing, I don't just start writing. I first create an outline. It's a doc file. Of course, I write everything electronically. I think most of you do as well, right? So it's a separate doc file that just has a number of points that I want to cover in the different sections of the paper. So if I'm trying to write the introduction section of the paper, let me think about what my introduction section should cover. A roadmap, if you may say, of the introduction section. I will first figure out what the roadmap is. What are the important things that needed to be covered in the introduction section? Because I find that if I just start writing the introduction section itself, my mind will wander, meander, and I will not stay focused. On the other hand, once I have written this outline, then I can keep referring to that outline to make sure that I am being faithful to that outline, that I haven't just taken off in an entirely tangential direction and it's not what I wanted to write. Yeah, in that sense I find it very helpful to create an outline. I also find it very helpful to create a list of figures that will go in my paper. Figures are the heart of the manuscript. Before I start writing the manuscript, I need to know what figures will go in this manuscript. I need to know that with a lot of detail, not just figure A, experimental setup, figure B, calibration plot. Calibration plot is not enough. I need to know exactly what the calibration plot will plot. What will be on the x-axis, what will be on the y-axis, how many curves will be there, what will be the values of the velocity at which I will carry out these calibrations. I would like to create a very detailed outline definition of each figure. Okay? This definition of figures is not set in concrete. It's not like I have to know exactly what figures will be there. I want to start somewhere, and then I am flexible enough to revisit my list of figures and adjust and change it if I feel the need to do so. But I've got to start from somewhere, is the point I'm making. Okay? A manuscript is a living and breathing document, right? It needs to adapt and change as you make progress in your research. And then, once the outline is there, just start writing. Okay? Especially early on, when I was younger, not that I'm very old, I used to have this problem that I say, okay, I now need to write something, my laptop is on, and I'm trying to write, and then my fingers don't move. I don't know what to write. Writing that first sentence takes an hour. Has that happened with anyone? Yeah? Yeah, getting started is the most difficult task, and it's not unnatural. Getting started, I have a stationary body. Getting it to move is the most difficult part. It takes the highest energy. Once it starts moving, you're only overcoming minor friction to keep it going, right? So my advice to you is just write. Just write anything. The first sentence that you write does not have to be perfect. You are always going to come back and change it, edit it. So to help you get started, just write the first sentence, even if it is not perfect. At this stage, it is more important to have something rather than to have the perfect thing. It's okay if your first draft does not look very good. As I said, more important is to have the first version rather than to have a perfect first version. Okay? I don't think it has ever happened with me that I write something and I'm done, it's ready to go. I actually will print it, edit it, then print it and edit it again, and so on and so forth. In fact, there have been some papers in our research. I keep changing the version number of the paper every day or occasionally in order to save old versions. There have been occasions when we've gone all the way to version number 68.0 before we were finally happy with the quality of the work and we sent it out. I'm trying to say that the first version is okay to not be perfect. It's more important to get it out there. Okay? Once you have the first version, edit it heavily. The first version always needs a lot of adjustments. The number of adjustments goes down dramatically as a function of the number of iterations. Right? The first iteration takes a lot and then it comes down, and by the fourth or fifth iteration you're making minor adjustments. Okay? At some point you get inputs from co-authors. You sent it to your the master student who helped you, or your foreign collaborator or your advisor, and say, I'm ready to get input from all of you. And ask all of them to use track changes so that you're aware of what is going on and work collaboratively. There are several tools like Google Docs, Overleaf, etc. that you can use for this collaborative writing. I'm a little old-fashioned. I still attach and send a doc file and they edit it and send it back to me, and it's a little painful. Perhaps I could do better using online tools, but whatever. In particularly, I don't use LaTeX, and the world is very polarized on that. You're looking at someone. Some people swear by LaTeX. They will give a dirty look to somebody who does not use LaTeX, right? For them, those who use Microsoft Word are an inferior species. Yeah, but I have my problems with LaTeX. I'm not going to go in here, but I'm just a Microsoft Word person. It doesn't matter. If you're a LaTeX person, may God be with you, good luck to you and all that. Just have a scheme and stick to it. The trouble occurs when a LaTeX person needs to write a paper with a MS Word person, and that has happened with me. Right? The LaTeX guy refused to write in Microsoft Word. He said, and I still remember, I can use Microsoft Word to write anything unless it is important. So I ended up basically editing on paper. So he would give me a PDF, I would print it, I would edit it on paper, and I would scan it and send it back to him. Say, okay, now take it and put it in your LaTeX. All right? Don't get me started, I hate LaTeX. The importance of writing is that I think the most important part of writing is that your writing needs to be concise, dense, and to the point. You should be using minimal number of words. I tell my students often, in order to write an abstract, I tell them go write an abstract. They write the abstract, give it to me 500 words. I say, okay, now go back and write the same thing in 200 words. And it's not easy. But then when they write it in 200 words, I say, okay, now write it in 100 words. It's always possible to do it. It just takes a lot of time. But even this very simple practice of taking something that you have yourself written in 500 words and trying to rewrite it in 100 words is very illuminating. Because you have to make compromises, you have to make decisions about what to write and what not to write. And you have to think about how I can possibly combine 3 different sentences in one single sentence. Right? I think that's a very useful exercise that I would recommend you all to do. Okay? I'm a big fan of minimalism when it comes to writing as well. The more important thing, flowery English is not important. What is important is a laser sharp focus on the intent. What are you trying to convey to the audience? Right? What is the big deal about your work? And of course, your writing needs to be supported by figures of the highest quality. No cutting corners there. If you were to come and work for me, you will hear horror stories of how I looked at a plot and I said, you know what, that's not the correct red color. You've got to go back and use the right red color. All right. I am laser sharp on that, extremely important in my opinion, and I think you should all be as well. Figures have to be the best possible quality. Your writing needs to be supported by good references, and your writing should not have grammatical errors. Okay? Your writing should have consistent style and font, and I recommend Times New Roman 12 point font size. Okay? And of course, your writing should not be plagiarized. And these days, with all the automated plagiarism detection tools, it's very easy to catch plagiarism. So you should be writing from scratch. You read something, put that away, and now write entirely in your own words. You're not going to go very far if you just copy and paste from somebody else. It will simply not work.
Whatever we have published, and we are writing the similar thing.
Yes, yeah, so
Our work also.
yes, so self-plagiarism is a problem. I've written a paper on a topic and I'm now writing a follow-up paper on the same topic. I'm going to have to use the same references, roughly the same motivation, etc., etc. Same equations as well. Even there I say, read your previous paper and then put it away. Just put it away. If you also start writing from scratch, it will still be sufficiently different from the past work. I'm just asking you not to copy paste. I feel if you are yourself going to make an honest effort of writing from scratch, you will be okay. Of course, since these anti-plagiarism tools are now readily available, you can check plagiarism yourself, right? And it will tell you exactly where the problems are, and you can go back and fix those specific places. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to talk about a typical journal paper and share my thoughts about how a journal paper is organized. Okay? Sorry, this is a little too small to see. If you would like, feel free to come forward. Can I zoom into PowerPoint? No. No. Anyway, the actual language is not important. I'm trying to give you a big picture of what a journal paper looks like. Okay. First of all, you have an introduction section in which the first paragraph is a very general introduction to the field. So in this paper, we had done some imaging, infrared imaging of 3D printing process, but in the very first paragraph, I am giving a very broad introduction to what 3D printing is, right? And what are the different types of 3D printing processes, and what is the state of the art in that field. Having done that, sort of like the grandma paragraph, I can call it the grandma paragraph. After that, I start talking about what others have done in this field, right? So I'm saying temperature measurement with this has been done, an IR camera has been used for this, a theoretical model has been developed, etc., etc. There are some spelling mistakes which I should fix as I go, and so on. I'm giving a rich, a dense, comprehensive overview of the related literature in this field to show that I know what others have done. Okay, and after that I identify what the gaps in the community or in the literature are. I say, in contrast to side view measurement presented in these papers, there remains a lack of experimental measurement of this. And then I justify why this measurement is important. I say that side view measurements are good, but on the other hand, blah 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 cannot be understood from the tools available in the literature. Right? I'm trying to create a justification for my work. I'm trying to identify the hole in the literature that I am going to fill with my work. And then in the end, I'm saying, given the importance of side view measurements, I'm saying, based on the literature survey that I have shown and the gaps identified, this work presents an alternate approach for measuring blah 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 blah. In general, the introduction section is probably the most difficult to write. It takes a lot of work to compress a lot of information. It's much easier to write the experimental setup. You know what the setup is. You can easily describe it, right? Writing the introduction section takes a lot more effort. So the rest of the paper is actually much easier to write. For that purpose, my students and I usually start with these easier things and then jump on to the introduction section later. We don't write in sequence. You don't have to, okay? Then in the results and discussion section, I would like to see a coherent, dense, scholarly discussion of the material supported by good quality plots. So this discussion is very dense, and I talk about a bunch of things that are going on. I need to go back. Actually, I found it. And towards the end, I conclude. How are we doing on time, by the way? Since I'm full screen, I'm not able to see the time.
4 minutes.
Okay, all right. So towards the end, I will conclude and I will give a summary of my research. I will give some future directions for the work and I will finish up there. Okay. It's important to make good plots. I think I've said this already, so I'm not gonna focus too much on it. But just to summarize, make your plots in MATLAB. The font size should be sufficiently large. Use lots of colors and line styles, and create rich, happy looking plots rather than just one straight line. Okay. And as I was saying, generate a high quality image file, a 600 dpi TIFF file that you export out of MATLAB before you paste into your PowerPoint slide. Sorry, into your manuscript. So again, the same example. This looks much more beautiful than that one. Writer's block is a well-known disease. We all sit down, stare in front of the computer, determined to write. I'm going to spend all day writing and I'll finish writing 50% of my dissertation today. And the reality is you sit there at 9 o'clock and by 11 o'clock you've written one sentence. Okay? If that happens with you, you're in good company, because writer's block happens to almost all people. What can you do about it? My suggestion is to write something. Just write a sentence. Just get started. It's getting started that is more difficult. So if you start by writing one sentence, the ideas will then begin to flow. Okay? It is overcoming that first step that is extremely important. One thing that helps me very well is to set up short sprints of writing. I never tell myself, I'm going to write all day and I'm going to finish half this manuscript today. Instead, I tell myself, look, it's 9:15, I have a meeting at 10 o'clock. I have 45 minutes, I will stop everything else, and in 45 minutes, for only 45 minutes, I will write as much as possible. So for a short amount of time, I'm committing myself to ignore everything else that is happening in the world and only write. I find that that itself helps me write quite a lot. Oftentimes, almost always, I exceed my expectations out of those 45 minutes. And if I set up those short sprints multiple times, those sprints have to be exclusive and focused, right? I don't want to double book myself. I can't be chatting with my boyfriend or girlfriend and also be writing at the same time, right? That's not what I'm asking you to do. Forget about everything else in the world. 45 minutes of only writing time. And do it a few times in the day, and you will find that you've written quite a lot and also done other things in parallel on that day. Okay, so embed your writing with other tasks as well. You've got to, go for a walk, have coffee, take some measurements, read other stuff, go take a class, whatever, and also write. I'm not a big fan of having a writing day. It's better to set realistic goals than be unrealistic. Okay, you're not going to write 50% of your dissertation in a day. But if you say that, look, I'm going to write 5 pages today, good quality writing, and if you get done, celebrate at the end of the day and give yourself a little treat for having met your goals. Okay, again, practice is the most important thing. The more you practice, the better you will get. It is an integral part of your research. It's not like you do your research and then you write. You have to write in parallel with your research or your technical work. Just write. You will get better and better with practice, and if you put in a concerted effort, exclusive, focused, short sprints of writing, I can clearly see that you can write much better. Okay, and again, to go back to a point that I made early on, identify a few good people whose writing you have liked, see what they are doing, and see if you can also follow that style of writing. And again, importance, figures are extremely important. So pay a lot of attention to the quality of figures in your work. Okay. So with that, I'll finish here. Happy to take questions and wish you all the best in your academic journey of writing and presenting. Thank you. I think there's some snacks outside, yes? Are there snacks outside?
I just came to ask you one question. I don't know whether somebody has asked.
Yes.
What's your take on students using ChatGPT for writing?
I'm not a big fan at all. No, you're not doing justice to yourself.